Energy providers have a cunning plan to help the national grid and save us a load of money. And it's often discussed how this specific thing is also very helpful with lowering heat pump running costs. The problem the electrical grid has is the amount of electricity we use varies so much throughout the day and year, and the amount of renewable energy fed into the grid changes like the wind. The plan is to fluctuate the rate you pay for electricity to persuade you to use electrical appliances when clean, cheap energy is abundant, so the grid doesn't have to fire up expensive gas-fired backup power stations to keep the lights on. But does this really work with heat pumps? Well, stick around to the end because we've created a lookup table for you to work out what tariff is best for you and how to maximize savings with that specific tariff. Plus, we have a couple of really important messages we really hope that energy providers will take note of. In this video, we're going to be looking at the nuances of different tariffs specifically for heat pumps, exploring 3 different tariffs that are available right now, and at the end of this video, we'll be revealing which tariff we think's best for most heat pump installations. Heat pumps have a huge variance in their operating efficiency. Averaging their efficiency per kilowatt hour produced throughout the year can result anywhere from over 500% efficient to well below 200% efficiency. See our videos on how heat pumps are over 100% efficient if you're a little bit confused. In order to get to the upper echelons of efficiency, it's actually very simple. We use stable state heating. Stable state heating is where we keep the house at a pretty even temperature throughout the whole day and night, rather than blasting energy into our house at high radiator temperatures for short bursts. This doesn't mean you have to have your whole house roasting hot at night, as we can use set back temperatures and balancing to keep sleeping comfortable. More details on this in our video, Should I Keep the Heating On Constantly? Using this method of heating means our hundreds of HeatGeek installations average 420% efficiency on heating and 448% efficiency for our HeatGeek Elites on heating.
Despite these installations being on older properties.
A far cry from the national average of 280% efficiency. Because of this, shifting our usage to certain times does concern me. So I've done some calculations to look at how much different tariffs could save you.
The control house that we're going to use in this video requires 10,500 kilowatt hours a year of heating
and uses steady state heating to achieve an efficiency of 430%. This means you'd need to buy 2,441 kilowatt hours of electricity per year to heat this home. If we're paying the current energy price cap at the time of recording for electricity, which is 27p per kilowatt hour, you can see that this system will cost £656 per year to run. Octopus Cozy is a variable rate tariff that, at the time of recording, charges a much cheaper rate of around 16 pence per kilowatt hour between 4 AM and 7 AM and 1 PM till 4 PM, then a much more expensive rate during the peak time from 4 PM till 7 PM of around 44p per kilowatt hour. The rest of the time is a standard rate of 27p. Enter your postcode on their website to find your specific rates. Let's say we significantly overheated our homes during the 6 hours of super cheap power to account for the 18 hours without heating, and assume that the average temperature of the property was the same as our steady state heated home.
An exaggerated and impossible scenario, but please bear with me.
In order to overheat our homes during these 2 cheap periods, we need 2 things: higher temperatures and more power. And unfortunately, both of these have a pretty big penalty for heat pump efficiency. A heat pump that only heats 6 hours of the day needs to be 4 times more powerful than your normal heat pump. If you had a 10 kilowatt heat pump previously, you'll now need a 40 kilowatt heat pump if you want to utilize this tariff in the same way in the depths of winter. This hypothetical situation would dramatically increase capital cost, but also means the heat pump is much more likely to cycle and overshoot during the more mild times of year. The second problem is the flow temperature the heating system now requires. The heat output of the radiator is determined by the flow temperature. So if we need to get more heat into the building during these limited periods, the flow temperature will have to increase significantly. For example, if you had 45-degree radiators to give you enough power for stable state heating previously, the radiators would now need to be 90 degrees Celsius to give you enough power if heating for only 6 hours in winter. If underfloor heating was used and also required to be 45 degrees flow temperature, it would now need to be 121 degrees Celsius in order to get enough heat into the room to compensate for the 18 hours of off period. Ignoring both of those very impractical points, these are extremely inefficient temperatures for a heat pump. As we've covered extensively on this channel, high system efficiency is achieved through keeping flow temperatures as low as possible. We'd only expect to see a small drop in efficiency if a heat pump is turned off for a few hours a day, but the efficiency would get much worse if, for example, turning the heating off for, say, 18 hours a day. Again, ignoring the impracticalities of huge heat pumps at high temperatures, let's assume that you could heat for the super cheap 6 hours a day and leave the heating off for 18 hours. Using our indicative lookup table, you can see that this would give an efficiency of only 60%. This would mean a running cost of over £2,800 a year to run and be much less comfortable. Even if you did manage to generate this much power and these high temperatures, you would have to reach an efficiency of 260% just to equal the running cost of steady state heating, and you would still make no savings. I don't for one moment think this tariff is meant to be used this way though. So a more sensible example may be heating for 9 hours, 4 AM till 7 AM, then 1 PM till 4 PM, then 7 PM till 10 PM, and the remaining 15 hours are switched off. Something that would much more resemble a typical gas boiler usage. Despite just 3 hours extra heating, this would mean only 2.6 times more power is needed rather than 4. This means we would have to take our 45-degree radiators up to 71 degrees to generate enough power. Referencing our indicative SCOP guide, this is likely to give around 2.3 SCOP or 230% efficiency if run this way, and would cost around £868 a year to run. Over £200 more expensive than a standard tariff, and would in fact need to be at a SCOP of over 3 just to have the same running costs. The next option is 15 hours a day of heating, from 4 AM till 4 PM, then 7 PM till 10 PM. If you manage to hit 380% efficiency, you'll finally save £32 a year. If you hit below a 3.6 SCOP or 360% efficiency, you'll save nothing. Lastly, I thought I'd just try avoiding the peak 44p cost period from 4 PM till 7 PM and heating for the other 21 hours for the rest of the day. This might give us a SCOP of around 4.2 and save £60 a year. However, if we just left this heat pump running for the full 24 hours on the Cozy tariff, as you will have already saved £13 per year anyway, it's probably only a £47 saving per year. So what about the other options on the market? Different models do exist. For example, Eon Next charges 9.5p for use from midnight till 7 AM, then 33p from 7 AM till midnight to promote car charging at night. If the same model was applied to our heat pumps, this would save £200 a year. Although I would pay at least £200 a year not to argue with the missus that the house is too hot at night and too cold in the day. If we instead use this tariff and heated for 14 hours a day, with 7 hours in our cheap tariff and 7 hours in our daytime to increase comfort, it would save £35 a year, but would still be hotter at night than in the day. Lastly though, if you use steady state heating on this tariff, this would already save you £13 per year. Before I move to the final tariff of this video, we should point out that we're all about experimentation here at HeatGeek. We've talked a lot about theory so far, but how does this actually look in real life? Well, to answer that, we're joined by the big dog, Dr. Michael Harper, our data scientist.
Hello.
So tell us what you've been up to and what we've been chatting about for this last while.
So yes, I think it's fair to say that we've probably had slightly different views on time of use tariffs in the last couple of months. You've been very much advocating steady state. I was quite interested in the time of use. So I set my own house up with one. I've moved recently to Eon Next, and I've been experimenting, trying to move as much of my heat to night as possible.
So heating up during the night as our second scenario, heating up during the night and letting it slowly decay during the day.
Exactly that. So I'm using the thermal mass of the home to act as basically a battery of the heat. So end of the night, my home's up to about 21 and a half degrees. And the aim is to let that heat basically ride me through the day as long as possible. Occasionally it is turning on. We just had a really, really cold patch a couple of weeks ago, but by and large, trying to keep as much heating off peak as possible.
What temperatures have you got down to, say, at like 8 p.m. at night when you finish cooking, you're just sitting down to watch a film, you're sedentary, so you might need the air temperature warmer. What temperature would it be at that point, do you think?
I'm actually surprised at how low it hasn't got. So I said 21 degrees is pretty much the standard we take up at the end of the night. End of the day, typically get about a 2-degree decay. So, 19 degrees, which depending on, houses, 19 in our house is quite fine.
That's actually really good.
And I don't live in a, sometimes I was telling people this, we must live in a really new home. It's a 60s house. It's airtight. It's heavy thermal mass, lots of brick, lots of concrete, but it's not, by no means is it super insulated.
And how have you found arguments with your missus?
I see her as a test subject of my little experiment.
This is the other side of it, isn't it? People are comfortable being hotter and warmer at night. This is why it's down to the people as well. There's a lot of variables in this, not just house and heat pump size and everything else. It's also user preferences. So we're just explaining the variables rather than giving the answer, if that makes sense.
When my mum visits, heating's on. And actually, on that note, there's one more tariff which we haven't said so far in this video, Octopus Agile. So Octopus Agile is a tariff similar to the ones we mentioned in the video. The price changes across the time of day, but Agile changes every half an hour. So you have different rates based on the current market prices. This is quite a risky tariff people like to go on because it can spike up a lot in price. We found that typical heat pump running in steady state would save about 5 to 10% across the last year. But this is a problem we want to look in more because if you're on Octopus Agile, you're not going to run it probably steady state. You are probably going to turn it off on those peak periods, as you mentioned in the video earlier.
So far, we've covered time of use tariffs. And if Mikey didn't have an oversized heat pump, he might have done better with our final model, a type of use tariff. OVO's type of use is an add-on to your current tariff. It charges a different rate for every kilowatt hour of power your heat pump uses, regardless of time, and standard rates for the rest of your electricity, encouraging households to make the move to renewable energy. Currently, at the time of recording this video, it only charges 15 pence per kilowatt hour for use whenever you use the heat pump. In our example with steady state heating, this would only cost £366 per year to run. That's a £290 a year saving against the energy price cap. Well, here I am 5 months later with a much needed haircut, and I've actually already been on this tariff for 5 months now. The example figures aren't quite the same for me as my 100-year-old home, which is EPC D rated, actually runs a heat pump at 480% efficiency and has already saved me £230 compared to the 27p energy price cap using steady state heating, and I'll update you when the full 12 months is up. If you didn't want to run steady state heating on the OVO tariff, here's how much your system would cost to run. Now, bear in mind, all of these examples have been for 45-degree radiators. For the layman, this means how big and efficient your radiators are, and 45 degrees is generally recognised as pretty large and efficient, and is also generally the minimum standard HeatGeek would install to right now. However, the vast majority of non-HeatGeek installations are actually designed for less efficient 50-degree radiators. And here's how they look on our indicative SCOP lookup chart. Much worse payback using variable rate tariffs with a 50-degree design. Pause on the screen now and take a look for yourself. In fact, if you want to use time of use tariffs and make it return for your pocket, you specifically require a lower temperature system with much larger rads, which are generally much more expensive to install, but perform much better when you intermittently use them, as you can see here. Let's also remember these areas highlighted here are too hot for even modern boilers to operate, let alone high temperature heat pumps. Do be aware that you can often HeatGeek tweak your system to actually run at a much lower temperature than it was designed for. Take a look out for our 3 steps to maximizing system efficiency to find out how. Well, this doesn't look very good for helping to balance the electrical grid at all, or does it? The whole point of time of use tariffs was to shift our electricity use around to help choose our electricity sources more efficiently, to help even out this erratic use of energy and push to times when the electrical grid is fed with wind and solar. If it was even possible to push all our heating usage into these 6 hours of cheap cozy tariff, you can see that the grid would have two very large 3,000 kilowatt hour spikes of draw per annum pushed into these two 3-hour time slots, which seems quite erratic and probably not stabilizing the grid in a measured way. If we add just another 3 hours of heating, you can see that this significantly drops this down to only 507 kilowatt hours per annum spikes by splitting the draw up, by also rapidly increasing the efficiency from a theoretical 60% to a more sensible 230% efficiency. This would be very much the traditional way a heating system would be ran. However, if we take this further and increase the efficiency to 430% by using stable state heating, we split the draw up over 24 hours, and you'll then end up with an incredibly low 102 kilowatt hours draw in the grid, which already spreads the draw very nicely away from the peak times and hugely reduces the overall demand, and in a way that's much more reliable for the grid to manage. Steady state heating naturally already load shifts for us to a large degree. We could still just avoid the 3-hour peak, and your draw for the other 21 hours would increase by 20% for the rest of the time it's switched on. So how important is it that we even bother shifting our heating usage around anyway? Shifting heating usage makes a lot of sense on the surface, as homes typically require 10,500 kilowatt hours of heating and only use 2,700 kilowatt hours of electricity on other appliances like cooking, washing, lighting, or fridge freezers. However, a correctly controlled average home with average insulation levels can easily achieve 430% efficiency or more using a heat pump. So it only requires 2,450 kilowatt hours of electricity for their heating. This already goes some way to shifting the responsibility over to the other appliances that don't benefit from a steady state type use to help with grid efficiency. For instance, car charging. Secondly, domestic electrical use is only 1/3 of overall demand. Much of this responsibility of balancing the grid can be pushed over to the commercial, industrial, and farming sectors, which will allow us to use more renewable power at higher comfort for our heating energy. Of course, this commercial and industrial use would decrease to half the demand if everyone in the country moved over to electric cars and heat pumps, but the point still remains. If you're watching this thinking, I don't want to be baked to death at night, steady state heating actually increases overall comfort, and you can actually lower the thermostat temperature with it, but we'll cover that in another video. There was a lot of information there, so here's a super quick roundup and our top tips for saving money with heat pumps on time of use tariffs are as follows. First off, we want to promote stable state heating, as this actually reduces the overall grid demand, saves significant bills still based on current variable rate tariffs, and most importantly, increases comfort. Use stable state heating as much as possible and keep temperatures as high as you're comfortable with at night and as low as you're comfortable with during the day. If we do want to load shift, design your heating system with as low a flow temperature, that's larger radiators, as possible. This will give much more flexibility if you do want to load shift. We should try and time our heating to avoid peaks rather than focus on pushing our heating into the troughs of use. If looking at heating tariffs in the future, look for much higher peak pricing that favours overall pricing rather than rewarding concentrated, cheaper heating in smaller timeframes. It's about avoiding peaks, not targeting troughs. Any cheap times that are available, use them for non-heating appliances such as dishwashers, washing machines, and car chargers. Lastly, it's worth noting that for simplicity reasons, all these examples haven't included for the fact that we can actually move hot water heating time. And as that typically accounts for 25% of the heating, is worth doing. I'd typically suggest for hot water to be timed for the warmer 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. outside temperature anyway, as this will get more efficiency from a heat pump, but it could be counteracted by lower nighttime tariffs too. If you would like to find out how much energy your home would use, just grab a digital heat loss by popping your postcode into our HeatGeek calculator on heatgeek.com for an instant result. This will also show you a load of other information about how you could upgrade your home too. Do you fancy diving a little bit deeper into all of this? Well, if you do, perhaps you're a researcher or you work for an energy firm, we've put all of this into a spreadsheet. Go down to the link in the description and you can download this spreadsheet for yourself. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.